Sounds like the revolution is alive and well. And there's a lot of spirit. This is wonderful. Father, thank you for that very nice introduction. Before I get started, I want to introduce two members of my family with me tonight. My wife, Carol, and granddaughter, Linda. You know, last night we were in a different part of California, up in Chico, and we had a little rally up there.
Yeah.
And they set a record. They set a record with a number of people coming out. But the record has been broken tonight. The message of liberty cannot be squelched. It's going to continue to spread. It is, and it's a wonderful message, and I am so delighted that the young people of this country are responding so favorably. So thank you very much for your interest in this cause. So this morning, after we had that wonderful rally last night and a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of cheering, I thought, well, I'll check the internet to find out what kind of stories were written. Well, one story, you know, we had, it is very, very accurate to say that we had over 6,000 people there. So I came across one story and said they had hundreds of people at Chico. Somebody reported there were 1,000. So, but the headline actually was a little bit more catching. The headline said, "Where's Ron Paul? What do we hear from him?" And yet, here we just had that rally. So tonight, I hope we're able to send a message where they do hear from us and know that we're here. The truth is, the message is spreading very well. If we compare it to 2 years ago, 4 years ago, or 10 years ago, it's dramatically different, and it's growing exponentially, and there's a good reason for that. not only is it a great message, the message of liberty, but there's a deep need for it in this country. We're seeing the consequence of not following our Constitution and not being dedicated to the cause of liberty. We have a mess. The answers can be found in our Constitution and in the understanding of what individual liberty is all about. I think the most important issue in the campaign, or anything that we do, has to do with the understanding and the promotion of individual liberty. Believing that if we truly understood that issue, we would have a lot less problems. But when you go on the campaign trail, not a lot of people, other than an audience like this, have a great deal of concern for personal liberty. They have concern for the economy, and rightfully so, because that is a reflection. A bad economy is a reflection of a misunderstanding or a poor understanding about what economic liberty is all about. So we do have an economic crisis going on, but it was a predictable crisis. It shouldn't be that difficult to understand. We're in the midst of this, and yet the people in Washington have not come around to understanding what the real problem is. And the problem boils down to about one thing. Government is way too big. The bigger the government, the less freedom that we have. And there's a lot of well-intentioned people, but you know where good intentions might get you. Good intentions aren't enough. The right ideas are critical. So there are a lot of good intentions, and people want to do things to help other people. They want to spread our goodness around the world. But whether it's helping people here at home, or making you behave in a certain manner, or improving the economy, you cannot do it with the use of force. If we want to improve on ourselves and others, it has to be done by setting an example and doing it voluntarily and not using force. But that's exactly what happens when you have an economy that is a planned economy. We know what the extremes are. We know what extreme socialism is and what communism is all about, because it's a failed system. And it was a predictable event that the Soviet system would collapse because they had a non-viable economic system. And fortunately, that is what brought the end to the Soviet system, not a nuclear war. It was a failed economic policy. And this is the reason that we ourselves must look at what we're doing, because we too have a failed economic system. It's not communism, it's called interventionism, where the planners in Washington, the do-gooders, the people who believe in welfareism and warfareism and inflationism and running up debt, they believe that they could do this forever. But guess what? The country went broke, and it's not working, and the people are realizing it. Not only are they losing their liberty, they're losing our ability to even take care of ourselves. So this is the reason the message that we have is the message that can solve our problems, whether it has to do with personal liberty or the economic crisis that we have today. Yeah! Our crisis was brought about because the government was too big and spending too much money. But it was logical that the politicians would continue to do this because they kept getting reelected. The more they spent, the more they pretended they could bring home. Even if they had to tax, borrow, or print the money, they were rewarded by reelection. Now that worked fine as long as we had money in the bank and we were a wealthy nation. But that has changed now. We're a debtor nation. We're the biggest debtor in the history of the world. We owe more money to foreigners than any other country has ever owed before. But the treasury is empty, it's difficult to extract the taxes, borrowing power is limited, and also there's going to be a limitation on how much our central bank can print money, and that is what we have to take care of and make sure that we don't finance government with the Federal Reserve System. Now we might have to be careful. Mr. Bernanke might hear us. Now, the Federal Reserve has been around for 100 years, and you know, with an election coming up, if we do well in this election and we have the opportunity, we should celebrate that 100-year anniversary by repealing the Federal Reserve Act.
Yeah!
But the Federal Reserve has caused a lot of mischief. Once again, a lot of well-intentioned intellectuals thought that this was a wonderful thing to come around and think you can debase a currency, dilute the value of the money. But that is nothing new. That is ancient. They accuse us of wanting to go back to something honest like a gold standard in the Constitution. The whole thing is paper money and debasement of the currency is ancient as well. It is very, very old, and it's dishonest. If you or I duplicated the currency, it's called counterfeiting. When government does it, they call it good monetary policy. Nevertheless, morally, it's the same thing. It's counterfeiting of money, and it should stop.
Yeah!
But the very least that we have to do, and the very first thing we have to do, is have a full audit of the Federal Reserve. We need to find out who their friends are.
Yeah.
And this is where we've made some achievement. Many in this audience, I'm sure, helped get the audit bill passed in the House last year. And of course, it didn't pass in the Senate, but we got a partial audit. We know more about the Fed than ever before. Matter of fact, I was a bit shocked, even though I've been very leery and concerned about monetary policy. I was still shocked to find out to the extent that they were involved. They were involved with $15 trillion of churning credit, bailing out their friends and buddies, not only in this country, but around the world. So this is a system that does not reward the middle class. Matter of fact, if you had only inflation, which is the destruction of a currency, and you just excluded everything else for the moment, destroying a currency destroys the middle class. The middle class lose it, and there's an automatic transfer of wealth from the middle class to the wealthy. And just look at what's happening today. But put that on top of a system that rewards the high-paid lobbyists, the people go to Washington and get the bailouts and the privileges, and then they have this housing bubble that was developed always for good intentions to make sure all poor people had a house. Well, sure, a lot of poor people who didn't qualify ended up getting a house, but the wealthy kept getting wealthier. The Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac executives made billions, and many others made billions. Then they got into the derivatives business, and then there was a collapse as was predicted. And lo and behold, these individuals who had been running this bubble up started yelling and screaming, if you don't come and help us, we're too big to fail, you have to bail us out or there'll be a depression. Well, the thing of it is, there should have been a depression for them, not us. So with all those good intentions and all this idea of entitlements, ended up the privileged and the wealthy were the entitled individuals. At the same time, the middle class suffered. They lost their jobs, and look at how many houses are lost, and look at the calamity of what has happened in the real estate. But this is a consequence of bad monetary policy and bad economic policy and a bad understanding. But we don't need to continue to do this. There's a better knowledge about monetary policy and economic system now than ever before. So there's reason to be hopeful that if we ever get our house in order and get our government back in the control of people who believe in government limitation and in our Constitution, growth can be restored rather quickly. But if we continue to try to solve the problem of spending, too much debt, too much printing money, too much regulation, too much involvement, and then we have the crisis, and what did they do? They're going to solve the problem by spending more money, borrowing more money, printing more money, taxing more money, and printing. It doesn't work. You can't solve the problem by doing exactly the same thing.